employees. But you know, the regulation is killing me. I can see the cost of it. I can see how much less productive it makes me. And I know personally that based on all the regulation that exists today, that didn't exist when I started my business, if I was trying to get started today as a young kid, I never could do it. I couldn't afford it. It's only because I've already grown to a certain size that I can survive it. So we need to have people who are in Washington who understand what it's like to live with these regulations and live with these rules, so they have an appreciation. You know, and they should have to know that the legislations that they're writing and the taxes that they're imposing, that they're going to be right here with us paying them. If they think they can be permanently exempt from it because they're living like royalty in some kind of, you know, House of Lords, no, we don't want that. And I want citizen legislatures. I mean, personally, I'm hoping I can do my job in one term. You know, I mean, I really don't even want the first one. And if our senators were doing a good job, I wouldn't need to. But they're doing a horrific job. So someone has to come in there that's not a career politician, that doesn't want to get reelected. And one of the things I know is once I get there, I think 6 years is going to be a long time. Because apparently, most of a senator's job is spent trying to get reelected. It's spent on fundraising. I'm not going to do any of that. So I'm going to have 6 real years to try to undo the damage that all these politicians have created.
And the other thing, get rid of the Fed. You're saying boom and bust are always artificially by the Fed.
Well, what happens with the Fed, I mean, it's, you know, getting rid of the Fed would be, in theory, I would be in favor of it. But the fear I have is, what would they replace it with? If we just give the printing press to Nancy Pelosi, you know, we're shit. But the problem is the Fed has been politicized. The Fed is used now as an arm of the government when it's not. It's an independent company. It's not even an agency. I mean, it's not even part of the government. It's private. You get a letter from the Federal Reserve, it's got a stamp on it. It's not part of the government. And it's supposed to be independent. But instead, it acts as an arm of the government. It helps re-elect incumbent politicians. It uses monetary policy to artificially stimulate the economy to help incumbents get re-elected. We don't want that. It's the same. We don't want our athletes using steroids. We don't want the economy on steroids, because we know that in the long term, that is doing more harm than good. We want a real economy, and the Fed is interfering with that because it refuses to let interest rates be where they're supposed to. I mean, when they put interest rates artificially low, there are consequences. It creates problems. And the problems hit us in the long term. In the short run, everybody thinks this is great. We get cheap money. My mortgage is lower, right? But in the long run, we're undermining our economy, and we suffer because of it. We need to take the politics out of the Fed. But if Congress would stand up, see, if we didn't run these deficits, then the Fed wouldn't be monetizing them. So the Congress has to stand up and stop spending money. You know, I mean, as a Republican, I want lower taxes. I mean, no one wants lower taxes more than me. But I know that we can't have lower taxes unless we substantially cut government spending. You got a lot of guys running for office as Republicans around the country. I'm going to cut your taxes. That's disingenuous. That's not. If you don't cut spending, you're not cutting taxes. Because if you cut taxes and produce a deficit, all you're doing is debasing our money. We're paying for it through inflation. We're paying for it for higher interest rates because we got to pay that money back with interest. So we're getting tax cuts in the present in exchange for tax hikes in the future. I don't want that. We need real, you know, and that's also part of the problem. I mean, the Republicans, I think, have done a lot of damage to the brand of Republican and to the concept of free markets. Because under the cover of the free market and pretending to be a conservative, there was a lot of damage that was done under the George Bush administration. I mean, George Bush was the biggest spender since Lyndon Johnson. Look at all the new big government programs that he enacted. Look at the huge deficits that he presided over. You know, he didn't veto a single bill. In his first term, he didn't veto anything. And I think in the second term, he vetoed one thing, and it wasn't a spending bill. So, you know, we need Republicans to actually act different than Democrats. Because right now, they don't act any different. They pretend there's a difference. I mean, yes, all the Republicans are now voting against the Obama health care bill. But if it was Bush's health care bill, they'd all be voting for it, just the way they voted for the expansion of Medicare. It's all the same thing. All we're doing is rearranging the deck chairs when we send a Republican to replace a Democrat, because they don't do anything different. I mean, sometimes they campaign, yes, I'm for small government, I'm for shrinking government, but the minute they get to Washington, it's it's bigger government, because they want to stay there. They like it there, they like the power, and they know the way you stay in Washington is to expand your power by taking it away from the private sector. So they keep growing government. We need to elect a Republican that is actually going to live up to those principles and maybe bring a lot of people back to the Republican Party who left it because they felt abandoned, because the party abandoned their principles.
Could you explain a little bit more about the mechanics of government control and interest rates?
Well, the Fed controls them.
Yeah.
The Fed sets interest rates through monetary policy.
But
what they do is they set federal funds.
When they say there's 0% interest, what's that?
Well, what they're doing is the Federal Reserve is loaning money to its member banks at 0 to 25 basis points. They're practically giving money away for free.
Are they just printing it, or where they?
Yeah, well, they don't physically print it. They just credit bank accounts, digitally. They just credit. All the major banks have accounts at the Fed, and the Fed just puts money into their account.
Are they increasing the money?
Yes, it's increasing the money supply.
That's
and
the same as printing.
Yes, but they're not literally printing it anymore because now we have it electronically. But we put all that money into the economy through the banking system. And the banks take that money and they're not lending it out to businesses. They're lending it back to the government. They're buying treasury bills, treasury bonds at 4%. They're making the spread. The reason that these companies are making so much money, Goldman Sachs just had record profits. Record profits. 90% of those profits came from proprietary trading. They're not doing anything to create wealth. It's not investment banking. It's not asset management. They're just trading their own capital. They're taking huge risks and making enormous profits. But where are they getting the money to make those big bets? They're getting it from the Federal Reserve. They're getting it from the taxpayers. We're giving them this money. They're getting rich. And they took all these big bets because they know if they fail, they're going to get another bailout. It's heads, they win, tails, we lose. That is the system that we have now. We have Wall Street has taken over the government and it's run for their benefit. All these huge bailouts, all these big, why are we doing that? Why aren't these people, why haven't they lost their jobs from these colossal failures? Because their buddies in government bailed them out. All these people that work for Bush and all these people that work for Obama, they all came from Wall Street. Their friends are on Wall Street and they're taking care of their friends. But it has undermined the economy. Our success as a nation is not a function of how much money these investment bankers make. We need to make real things. We need to reindustrialize our economy. We need people getting rich, actually doing things that help the economy, not just gambling and shuffling paper around. Because the money they're making is money somebody else is losing. And the people who are losing it are the taxpayers. Yeah.
I have a question. I agree with and understand a lot of your basic economic principles, but the question I have for you is more campaign issue. With all due respect, I think just about any Republican is going to beat Chris Dodd. Doesn't matter who it is. But prior to you coming here today, myself and probably a lot of people in this room didn't know much about you. How do you plan to, or what's your game plan on getting your name out there, getting everybody else to know about you, overcoming the lead of a career politician in Rob Simmons, although he is a Republican, and the way Linda McMahon is flooding the market with advertisement? How do you intend to beat those two candidates? And I think once you beat them, you're going to have a pretty good chance of beating Chris Dodd, as will either one of those other two, if they win the primary.
I mean, that is part of the opportunity, right, to get me to the Senate, is that I've got an opponent like Chris Dodd, who, if I had to manufacture a component for myself, that's who it would be. Right? I mean,
it's going to be Rob Simmons.
I mean, he was on television saying, Fannie is fundamentally sound, and I was on television the same day saying they're going to go bankrupt. I mean, so who understands the economy? He's the chairman of the Senate Banking. So he's an ideal candidate. So I think people in Connecticut, have a rare opportunity to actually make a difference, to not simply replace Chris Dodd with another politician. I mean, Simmons is probably a nice guy. I've met him a couple of times, but he was in Congress for 6 years. I mean, there's probably 20 senators right now just like him that are already there doing nothing, just going along, status quo, voting for the unbalanced budgets. I mean, he's against them now, but he voted for them all when he was in office before. So we have an opportunity to really do something different, to send me to the Senate, and that's a wake-up call, and that's and there'll be, believe me, a lot of other candidates from outside the mainstream will feel empowered and enter the race in 2012. And if we're going to make sure that Barack Obama loses in a landslide in 2012, and we got to do that, having me in the Senate is a big step in that direction. So what I'm going to do, my campaign is barely getting started. I got into the race late. I was